Hi, we're members from the Space Combat team. It is a cross-disciplinary team from multiple teams at CIG. It includes members from Vehicle Experience team, Vehicle Feature team, Player Experience team, and also several other departments. The main thing about these people is that they're invested in space combat and they're actively playing the game. We're going to discuss the current state of space combat in 3.14 and 3.15. And then we're going to talk about what things are working, what things we're unhappy with, and what changes are coming up in the short and long term to make the experience better. And the last thing we're going to talk about is the importance of community, because we're not making this game in isolation for us. We're making it with and for you.
We went back through all the previous Star Citizen releases and we looked at what was the most loved features out of all these releases in the past, and which were the most interesting, what players said about these releases, what they didn't like about these releases. So it's just like an overview of the past design choices and just like an analysis of where they ended up with the game and what experience they brought to the game.
The second step was to analyze the works of John Boyd, who did a lot of works related to dogfighting and to military strategy theory in the past, meaning so-called OODA loops, which are really important for us for decision making. The third step was to have a lot of calls and chats with so-called subject matter experts. These are people who in the past were working or flying for the armed forces and have a heavy knowledge in dogfighting. We even went so far to have actual dogfighting lessons in flight simulators with former members of the Royal Air Force.
So we brought this all together through a series of combat summits, and this involved bringing people from different areas of the company together. So we went away from our kind of day-to-day stuff and we got together and talked about, you know, all these past releases, these theories we had about combat and how they kind of, you know, translate to the Star Citizen experience we were aiming for. And we tried to create a plan, you know, for the next 12 months. So we get asked what the high-level goals are as far as space combat goes to Star Citizen. This comes down to a few key points, which is a meaningful decision making. So it's giving the player options and also giving the players the data to act on. So we give the player the information of the systems that we're building so they can make the choices.
The second part is giving every weapon and every vehicle and every other item a proper purpose in the game.
And then we embrace those limitations that those choices make. So the players have to make choices. So it isn't just a case of picking the best of everything. There's certain limitations that come with picking certain things. Then basically it's got to feel believable. So we aren't just artificially making those, you know, limitations for the sake of it. They actually come from real consequences of, you know, of our systems that we build.
And the last high-level goal we want to achieve is to avoid meta gameplay. We realize this is really hard, but we will try to eradicate it as much as possible. So where are we now with space combat? In 3.14 and 15, we tried to establish a new combat foundation, which meant for us stripping out the granular details in space combat balance for the time being and focus only on the base combat experience first.
And that affected 4 key areas. The first was assigning all ships to a specific archetype. So no ship was the best for everything. And then it also allowed us to kind of kick off our journey to improve the multicore experience in Star Citizen. So there was a purpose to having more than one person in your ship.
Second, we did the same thing with weapons. Right now, there are only 2 archetypes in the game. One type of weapon is good against fighters, the other one is good against large ships. However, we will expand on that in the future. The third aspect is the shields. We simplified many dynamics in the interim to make them more readable and easier to balance. And lastly, we introduced the capacitor gameplay, which in some sort is the stamina gameplay for our thrusters, weapons, and shields. So with that state established, we can now talk about the combat improvements we want to try in the short term. And the very first of that is G-force exhaustion. In the past, we had a lot of G-forces, and during dogfighting, G-force was a very important part of how you handle your ship. That impact was lost over time, and we're currently working on bringing that back, which means lowering the G-force thresholds to force players to do certain maneuvers to recover from the exhaustion effects.
You know, our goal with this is that you'll need to be really careful with, you know, not only how you manage the energy on your ship, but how you manage your ability to sustain Gs over the long term.
Let's quickly expand on the weapon archetypes and variations. At the moment, there's only 2 archetypes for weapons in the game. One is good against fighters, and the other one is good against large ships. But we would like to expand on these types. We would like to see specialized weaponry against infantry, specialized weaponry to intercept ordnance and incoming missiles. We're also thinking about suppression weapons and an unspecialized weapon types like a jack of all trades, master of none, which you can use for everything, but it might not be the best weapon of choice. In addition to that, you can expect that we're gonna spread out the weapon types as such as well. So you can expect anti-fighter cannons and anti-large ship Gatlings again. Let's talk about shield variances. In 3.14, we had to unify all shield generators of all sizes in order to rebalance them. In 3.15, we started reintroducing differences between those shield generators again.
And this was kind of to bring the shields down more within a window that we were happy with, because before there was a difference of up to 90% between different shields, and we thought that was too much, where the player couldn't really make a difference.
Going forward, we will try to make the shields more diverse again, so that you have a proper decision to make what to take with you, but still it will only be a moderating variable in the PvP outcome, right? We still want the skill in your dogfighting capabilities to be the deciding factor of the outcome of a dogfight.
The power triangle has been super important for us as far as allowing players to manage combat in Star Citizen. It gives players that really cool option to kind of focus their energy on a particular resource that the ship has. But we're still looking at ways we can improve this. So we're looking at kind of adding a non-linear curve to these things, so it doesn't just come in at the same rate throughout the whole kind of regen. And we think this might add a really interesting dynamic and just an extra thought that you've got to put in there when you're managing your systems.
And we're also retiring with the idea if the weapon capacitor assignment, for example, should affect all the turrets on a ship, which is currently not the case. An important thing we added in 3.15 are minimum regen for all power triangle assignments. So even if you have your full assignment, let's say put to engines, you get still a little bit of regen in your weapon capacitors and on your shields. So flight tuning, right? By far the least important aspect of combat tuning. Just joking. No, we're not happy with the current flight tuning. What we did in 3.14 and 15 was pushing the ships into an archetype space, but that also meant that a lot of the differences between the ships were lost. And we also had to trick some numbers here and there. For example, ships can now strafe up way faster than they can strafe down. That is down to some magic numbers we added, but we actually want to reduce these magic numbers and do it properly with the thruster tuning. This will be, however, a longer ongoing process, but in the end we will get a more realistic feeling ship handling out of it. What we added in 3.15 by very popular demand are options for the TVI visibility, so you can go into your options now and set your TVI visibility to always on if you do not want the TVI to fade away. This will take a considerable amount of time, so this will be an ongoing thing for quite a while. And an important disclaimer here, we'll try to be as real as possible, but we always have to take it back to the point of fun. We're not aiming for realism, we are aiming for believability and enjoyment. The idea of trimming was born out of 2 things. First, players who play decoupled, they wanted to have a control to actually hover at a certain altitude. And the other thing was, we looked at how military choppers implement their trimming systems, and then we thought, maybe that is something that can be added especially for dual stick users. So we investigated a trimming system where you can push a button and then set your left or your right stick in a specific position, and you let go of the button and the ship will keep that input. And any kind of input you do afterwards will be in relation to that. So currently we have this in a prototype state, and we'll try to give it to the players once it is out. This kind of system will allow mouse and keyboard players to have a smooth thruster control again, as opposed where currently when they press W and S, they just go to the full forward and backward motion. So that gives us a little bit more control when this type of control is needed. As you might have noticed in 3.14, we somewhat botched the auto-gimbal implementation. During flying, you will see that the auto-gimbal aiming crosshairs, they will kind of like go all over the place. So in 3.15, we actually fixed that and rewrote how the auto-gimbals work. However, we are not really completely happy with the auto-gimbal system, because at the moment it feels for us like it's being a skill bridge instead of having an actual purpose in the game. So going forward, we're going to investigate what the actual purpose of auto-gimbal, or the auto-gimbal mode in general, should actually be. We're also investigating further things like turning off your weapon assists on purpose when you need it. This is certainly not something that the average player will do, but we know a couple of PvP players who really would like to have that option at times. And good news for 3.16, we're adding staggered fire groups for pilots. So we rewrote the staggered firing algorithm, so now it staggers not between all the weapons you have, but between every type of weapon that you have per weapon group, which means we can completely give this into the control of a pilot. And the last of the short-term plans, turrets. At the moment, we cannot make turrets just better than, or turret weapons just better than non-turret weapons, because a weapon is a weapon. But we're currently working with the weapon team to figure out whether or not we can just buff certain properties of a weapon when they're assigned to turrets. A good use case here is, for example, the hammerhead. While it's very, very dangerous in close quarters, once you get at a specific distance, the bullets, they're just flying too slow to actually make the hammerhead a meaningful anti-fighter platform. And this is what we want to change. So we're investigating whether or not we can just buff all the turrets on a hammerhead without changing the actual weapon itself. So these were a couple of our short-term plans currently in development. We'll show more of them the closer you're getting to be finished. But now let's jump ahead and talk about some long-term plans. Little caveat here, all these things we're going to talk about haven't been started yet, and they may still change over time, but we wanted to share our thinking just the same. So one of the most important aspects we want to change in the future is the problem of high speed. We know that high-speed combat doesn't work well, and we also know that low-speed combat between 200 and 300 meters per second is incredibly enjoyable. How are we going to resolve that? We don't know yet. We'll see. The next part is ballistic ammo management. At the moment, we have very low ballistic numbers in the game, and this is because the physicalized armor system is not online yet. So you can expect some changes towards ballistic ammo and how we manage ballistic ammo in the future. We also would like to introduce a custom operator mode for EMP, because as a pilot, you need more data and more information, what you can do in order to shut down another ship that you're fighting against. We also toyed with the ideas of flak. We would like to have a flak concept that is an area denial weapon that works against fighters or missiles or even incoming projectiles. Also, we're currently working with the AI team to copy typical flight maneuvers that players do to AI ships. In the same vein, we also would like to try to have AI ships not using, abusive behaviors that are, less enjoyable. A last long-term goal we would like to do is to deepen the capacitor gameplay, but this requires also that other long-term changes like, high-speed combat are resolved first. We would like to think about things like adding more thrust, adding more active management on the assignment, and other more active effects.
So before we let you go, let's talk about the importance of the community, because this is something which really matters a lot to us as a team.
Community is incredibly important for our process. A lot of the design decisions that informed our combat summits were actually based on proposals that the community did. When it comes to balancing, community is incredibly helpful in providing us data that allows us to nail down issues fast, finding balance problems. They even sometimes tell us, hey, this is the wrong number in the game data that there is. So going forward, we would like to do more playtesting with you, the community. Sometimes we're going to stay undercover, sometimes not. Also, I would like to say that while we might not reply to every Spectrum thread we see, we read everything. So please always give us your feedback, give us your opinions, because in the end, it will help us to make a better game. So thank you for your continued cooperation and support for us, and enjoy IAE next week.
So what did we learn this week? Well, we learned that the vehicle experience team is using every resource available, from real-world subject matter experts to their own experiences in actual military flight simulators, and of course the feedback that you all provide in Spectrum and beyond to make the future of space combat as fun and enjoyable as can be. You take realism, adjust that to believable, and bring it back to fun. Now, the Intergalactic Aerospace Expo begins next week, and it's the biggest ship and vehicle showcase of the year. You're going to get a chance to check out almost everything Star Citizen has to offer, and maybe experience a few reveals here and there. Be sure you don't miss out on that. For Inside Star Citizen, I'm Jared Huckabee. We'll see you all next week.